Hey, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. Today I have the one and only Tiffany Berg, who was the former Utah Mrs. Utah back in the day, not that far long ago. And also, she's a messaging strategist and a speaker and author. And you help people tell their stories, but in the right way, a strategic way. So, welcome to the show, Tiffany.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. You're right. There are ways to tell our stories that can be off purpose and ways to tell it that can be very much on purpose. So there's a strategy.
We need to hear about that. And okay, so tell me a little bit. You and I actually met at church and we're both lovers of Jesus and like all about the word and the worship, which is so inspiring to me. And so I'm sure that's a secret in your success. God is a secret in your success. Tell us a little bit about your story and your journey.
So back in 2000, I was a stay-at-home mom with 5 littles, and I was really overwhelmed, as some of you might be as moms too. It just seemed so noisy, not just in my home, but in my head. And what started as a glass of wine became a bottle of wine, became lots of bottles of wine. And I wasn't the mom that I wanted to be. I had grown up with addiction around me, and I did not want that, but I was in it. And so I got some faith-based counseling and really worked through, gosh, what's underneath all of this self-destruction. And as I started to share my recovery with other women, what I learned was so many of us struggle with that. So many of us struggle with addiction and low self-esteem and self-sabotage. So as I started talking about that, I realized that writing and speaking from stage also came naturally. And I had
Mm.
more and more doors open to where I was able to speak at universities and to civic leaders and really share a message of hope. And at that point, I wasn't very computer savvy, but
Mhm.
I realized if I write it down and I write out the steps that help me heal, I could get it out to more women. So I
Yes.
put together some emails and some templates and worked with 100 women nationally. And that was back in the day when it was just email. And I put out some CDs
Uh-huh.
and I wrote in some columns, and then I was published internationally in a success magazine. Started doing my TV show and radio show, did that out of Salt Lake City for two
Mhm.
years out of the Christian TV station there. And
Wow.
really what I saw was, and this goes to scaling your message. So I want people to take note of this. What I realized was there were some women that could buy a $15 book. There were other women that could work with me for an hour at $150. There were other women that would work with me for 6 months. And at that time, it was $1,500. So you can kind of see, right?
Mhm.
And so Jenny Craig's organization, in fact, would send their directors to me. And I realized that this scale was the same message. So
Right.
if I put it in a book, then my one-on-one clients could read the book, but it could also be like a 12-week course. And so I realized it wasn't my mess that people wanted. They
Mhm.
wanted credibility. They wanted to know I had struggled, but what they really wanted were the tools so that they could change their lives and their successful outcomes.
Yes. And so you helped change their lives. And then what led you to Mrs. Utah?
Actually, that was the platform Recovery is Possible. It was very challenging to get on stage and say, here I am, I'm a recovered alcoholic. I'm a mom, and I believe recovery is possible. What was interesting, Amanda, and we both believe that God directs our paths. That same year, some numbers came out about the women in the state of Utah, and we had some of the highest heroin usage and women going to be incarcerated due to addiction. And so as those numbers came out, I had more and more opportunity to work with leadership in the state of Utah and speak with moms who were incarcerated and also working on sobriety.
That's amazing. What a gift, because it seems like such a little secret. I didn't know that about moms and heroin. Sheesh, like real heroin, like hitting it up, or the heroin in
Yes.
the whatever the drugs are that are now in the pills, or both.
And again, that was 2007. We've
Hmm.
unfortunately gotten worse. We
Right.
have more access even to heroin than ever before.
Oh my goodness.
And moms are unique in the way that we're trying to manage so much with our families that in this perfectionism, we have a hard time saying that we're struggling. So we self-medicate to just push through. And
Right.
it is a big secret.
That is a big secret. My goodness. Okay, so I love how you turned your pain, and it sounds like was it hard for you to recover? It seems like you breezed through it pretty quickly through the faith-based
I
recovery.
didn't breeze through it. I think anybody that has struggled knows that it's a lifelong um, learning and growing and accountability. So I've learned that uh, accountability is that string to the kite. And I connect to people that live a healthy lifestyle and I stay very accountable to those people. So I
Yeah.
have a handful of people that I still call if I feel like I'm struggling and that keeps me grounded. So
Hmm. So when you were going through that, did you have a path? Did you think you were going to be a speaker, an author, a trainer?
no,
What
no.
was
In
your
fact, the
plan to be a
last
mom? Yeah.
I was just going to be a mom. I am a high school graduate
Good.
and I did not have any knowledge of how to publish a book, um, get on stage and speak. But at that time, when I was bootstrapping it and I realized duplication was key, right? How can you duplicate your message? How can you get it in front of more people? As I saw that the printed word was powerful, right? And then that
Hmm.
led to speaking in front of groups, which was powerful. So when I realized that calling on my life was to be publicly embarrassed in some ways, right?
Right.
To say, oh my goodness, I've struggled with, and then to duplicate and scale that and tell more and more people, what I realized was God will use that platform to heal other people. And so I
Yes.
just had to get out of I just had to get out of my way and
Hmm.
be honest.
That's beautiful. And so what tips, because I think a lot of people watching this are also being called, but God calls he doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called, as we've heard that soundbite before. So how, like, in fact, I actually have a speaking engagement next month in front of 600 people, and I'm even scared. I'm like, so how do
Yeah.
you, and I've spoken in front of lots of people, but how do you equip people through telling their story and their strategy? What are some tips or for preparing and doing your best and getting out of your own way?
So I love the story of Gideon. So I'm going to talk about that for a second.
Yes.
Gideon was his people were very afraid of being killed, destroyed, having their things stolen. And at that time, in that oppression, Gideon actually was threshing wheat in the wine press. Okay,
Yes.
he was he was not visible. Usually when you thresh wheat, you're above the ground and you're, maybe having a donkey pulling a weight, right? And it's separating the wheat and the chaff and right. And so he is in the wine press. He's like in this pit and he's doing it in secret. And the angel of the Lord comes to him and says, "Hey, um, you need to go and save your people." And he's like, no, I'm like the littlest of a little family. I'm like the smallest of the small. Like,
Right.
what are you talking about? In fact, the angel of the Lord calls him mighty hero, right?
Right.
And he's like, no, like I'm insignificant and I'm in hiding. So I can't lead anybody, right?
Mhm.
Well, the angel of the Lord tells him, go with the strength inside of you. Go with the strength inside of you. And basically, you've been called, go with the strength inside of you. Okay. And so then there's a whole other story where, there's testing and ultimately Gideon learns to be powerful and lead. And
Mhm.
I think today, a lot of your viewers, a lot of people that are watching right now are behind their computers and they're making Instagram posts and they're making, they're on Facebook and they're on TikTok and they're observing a lot of things, but they're in a hole. They're
Mhm.
not actually leading.
Right.
So I'm going to say the same thing. Hey, little hero, get out of that pit, come out into the light and lead.
And lead.
Because
Lead.
there's never been a time where people have been so lost and so needing actual leaders. And I'm not talking about, we talk about the shiny object syndrome, right? But I think now with influencers, we have this shiny person syndrome, right? We have
Mhm.
influencers that maybe have a big following, but they're actually not doing anything in their community. They're not doing anything that really affects lives. Okay.
Right.
I had the opportunity a couple of months ago to go in with a team of volunteers and renovate this home for a needy family. They'd had over 70 foster kids come through their home. They had 4 still living at home. 2 of the children were special needs, and 1 was terminal. And so we were able to come in 3 days and create $80,000 worth of upgrades and ADA accessibility for this family. And the reason I tell you that is you will never have the right inspiration if you are in your safety.
Mhm. True.
Because when you get in front of people and you see their hurt and you see their need, you will be given the right words and you
Mhm.
will learn ways to help more people. But if you're behind your computer, you won't know how to help more people. You
Right.
actually have to have those conversations with other humans, right? When I was at the rec center in like 6 in the morning years ago, and a woman came running up to me and she threw her arms around me and she
Mhm.
said, Tiffany, you saved me. And I didn't know who she was. She started explaining to me that she had gone to one of my workshops where I talked about addiction years earlier.
Wow.
Because of the things that I had shared, she changed her life and she left an abusive marriage.
Whoa.
And I'm so glad that I wasn't a writer that was just behind my desk. I'm so glad that I got the courage up to stand in front of groups of women and say, wow, ladies, if you're hurting, I was hurting too. And
Mhm.
it's possible to get out and heal. It's possible to have a better life for yourself. But it was in those conversations with real people that I found the right words. And so getting out,
Yeah.
networking, that's a great place to start. But getting out and actually asking people where they're hurting, what they need,
Mhm.
then you're going to feel that calling and God's going to move you.
Amen. So you were telling me beforehand that you think there's a, a good way to tell a story and then a not so great way, especially since COVID.
Yes. So, uh, about 10 years ago, even 15 years ago, you would see people with disabilities or you would see people with trauma stories, and they would tell this trauma story, and it would get them on stage.
Mm-hmm.
after COVID, people, I think, were so individually and collectively done with trauma.
Yeah.
Like it was like, I don't have any bandwidth for trauma.
Right.
So
Yeah.
they're looking more towards people that are solution oriented,
Mm-hmm.
people that speak from a place of wisdom, but
Mm-hmm.
people that have gotten out of trauma.
Right.
So if you're leading with your trauma, like truth is a torch,
Mm-hmm.
trauma is not.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't today lead with trauma. You have to lead with light.
Yes, I agree. I think that a lot of people, they'll tell trauma and it's so triggering to the audience that then the audience doesn't feel safe and then they get trapped in the trauma and then they can't even move forward or backwards and they get paralyzed. And people always remember how you make them feel versus what
Yes.
you say.
And
Yeah.
as a speaker, it's so important to realize you, even though you're on stage, right? You might have 1,000 people in front of you. Even though you're on stage, what you really need to say is what you would say if you were sitting next to the person on the front row.
Mhm.
What
Simple,
would you
right?
say to them in the moment? You wouldn't be vomiting your trauma.
No,
You would be asking them and inviting them to share theirs.
exactly.
How can I support you? How can I encourage you? So
Hmm.
sometimes people get it backwards. They think I want to be on stage and I want to lead. But really, if you lead, you will get on stage.
Right. Yes. And so, what do you think about people who want to write a book? What are your thoughts about people who have a desire to be authors?
But I love authors, first of all. I Books are my jam, right?
Me
I
too.
love authors. I think it's so important though to get clear on what your book needs to do for you. Because
Mm,
you can dump a lot of money and a lot of your minutes into the creation of a book that actually doesn't create fruition. So if you have kids and you have a spouse and you have, your health, right? You really need to look at, why am I investing so much in this book and what will be the return?
mm,
Because if you're just writing your memoir and it's not going to give you a return, um, it may not be advantageous for you to do that right now.
mhm.
If you have solutions that can lead to fruition, revenue, lives being changed, that's a great investment. But a book should really be part of your overall marketing strategy. So, for example, um, one of my clients, she was a nutrition coach, okay? And she wanted to write a book about eating a plant-based diet. But that's a really like narrow
Mhm.
arena. Usually people that want to eat a plant-based diet, they're going to go to Pinterest and find recipes. They're not
Right.
looking for a how-to book. So when we talked about her coaching program, she coached very obese women who had messed up their metabolism, that were between 40 and 48, 50. And she would have, over a period of time, a great result with them. So instead, we created a book called If Diets Don't Work, What Does? And she was able, in a 12 chapter book, to create a 12-week program that
Nice.
then walked women through this idea of needing to be thin, all the way through to developing uh, better eating habits with plants.
Love
So,
that.
so really, when you look at why you want to write a book,
Mhm.
look at how it can enhance a real business. You might be a clutter coach, you might be a CPA, you might be a homeschool coach. One of my clients who finished her book, she was 70 something and wrote a book as a homeschool coach and did very well. So think about, who am I really trying to help, and does my book do that. And think about Lunchables, right?
Hmm.
Lunchables at the grocery store. Somebody could walk around and get salami and cheese and Ritz crackers, right? But why do people buy Lunchables? They buy it because they don't want the whole meal.
Right.
They want this perfect size. And then
Mm-hmm.
if they want to have a buffet, they're going to go somewhere else, right? So
Yes.
your book is like a Lunchable. You want to be strategic about what goes in it,
Mhm.
strategic about the problem that it solves, and then your coaching can be the buffet.
That's good. And then, like you were saying in the beginning, that you had your book for 15 at 1500 and then a group program. So that's it. So it's sort of like the little Lunchable, but then you can expand it out
Yes,
for one-on-one. Now, would you
yes.
recommend people create their book first or their program first?
Um, Once you have what I call a wireframe, when you have your wireframe, as far as, well, think about it like this. Here's a perfect example. If Moses was to write a book, he could write a 12 chapter book, and the 10 commandments could be chapter 2 through chapter 11, right? The
Mm-hmm.
first chapter could be his story. I was a baby in a basket, went down the river, grew up in the palace, and then God called me. And then here's the 10 commandments.
Mm-hmm.
12th chapter could be, so now you know all these things, go into the promised land and have a great life, right?
Yeah.
That could be a 12-week program. It could be a 2-day workshop where he talks about, commandments 1 through 5 the first day and 6 through, 10 the second day. So there are lots of ways to package that Lunchable once you know what needs to go in it. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
my clients, once we get that Lunchable or wireframe figured out, they start coaching their process immediately,
That's
even
good.
before the book comes out. And the goal
Mm-hmm.
is make it solid enough that you're actually creating revenue from day one.
Yes. And what kind of revenue do you think that they could make from day one?
It depends on how brave they are,
Yeah.
really. Revenue is a confidence thing.
Mm.
How effective you feel you are, how qualified you feel you are. There are people who've been coaching for 30 years and they don't make very much. There are people who've been coaching for 30 days and they make quite a bit.
Right.
So it's your level of confidence. Once we have a wireframe, people usually feel a lot more confident.
That's great. I love that. It's so true about the confidence. And you get to write the check. Nobody's paying you. You get to choose for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, and
Okay.
you also have to value your own time, right? If you
Mhm.
know you are saving people's lives, if you know you are changing generations, you know
Yes.
you are saving marriages, really you have to know the value you bring and the time invested, and then make some really good choices with your strategy financially.
Amen. All right. So tell us if someone's going to architect their story, give us a couple tidbits to help us really make that story. You said wisdom, you said support. How can we how do you help someone from 50 years or 20 years of stories find that one story strategically?
The best way to understand your story or the value of your story, how to be strategic with it, is to know what your audience needs.
Hmm.
Okay. I shared the story of coming out of addiction. I shared that story because that was my path. And many of the people that are watching today have been hurt somewhere along the way and they need to know their path. So I'm giving you a story by talking about me getting help with my addiction and then sharing it with people as an example, right? Because
Hmm.
that is who's listening today. So you have to look at your audience. What is going to move them? What is going to give them urgency? What is going to
Hmm.
give them conviction,
That's good.
right? And often, um, when we're looking out into an audience, they want to lead as well. So when we're
Nice.
looking at our audience, what do they need to lead their lives well? Do they need more insight about diet and exercise? Do they need more insight about clutter? Do they need more insight about relationships? What do they need? So, for example, I'll have your audience go with me for a minute. If you picture yourself on stage for just a minute, and not you, Amanda, because you're awesome, right? But
But
your
I'm gonna
audience
still
is,
pretend.
you're going to do it. Okay, well, this will work too. So if you close your eyes and you picture yourself on stage, and you're confident and you're moving on the stage and you're expressive, you're animated, you're on point with your message, right? You are just so called and so comfortable, right? What I'm going to have you see is that you're seeing yourself with awesome habits.
Mm.
What it will take for you to get to being that person is better habits. Because when you picture yourself, you're organized, you're the perfect weight, you carry yourself confidently, you're disciplined. It's all about habit. So that's where I would tell people to start
Yes.
is when you picture that you, what are the habits she has?
Yes.
That's where you want to go. You don't
Mhm.
need to look around at other people on social media. You need to look at you and say, oh, I saw a picture of myself with better habits. So,
Yes.
what is the next habit that I need to crush together?
I love that. I'm all about habits. Habits are everything. I mean, that habits then become your results. So yeah,
Yes.
put it in the chat, y'all. What is that habit that you saw yourself? And it's funny because I'm thinking about this talk that I'm doing, and I actually saw myself wearing tennis shoes on stage instead of heels because I walk better
Oh,
in running
right.
shoes, but I always wear heels on stage. I just since 2020, I haven't really graced a stage. Is that right? I've had my own stage
Yeah.
anyway, but I wore
Mhm.
heels. But heels are not easy. Well, let's
They're
talk
not.
about image because I really think, my friend and I were talking recently and we said we'd never trust a man in a baggy suit. We both had a vibe on someone and we said a baggy suit, can't trust it. And there's these subconscious, judgments that we put on people for their appearance. So because you help people prepare for pageants and things, what are some tips you have for people for speaking on stage and being seen on stage and visible?
Yes. I would say hygiene is hugely important.
Okay.
Hygiene, like you were talking about a baggy suit, and that doesn't mean you have to be perfect at
Right.
all, at all. But hygiene is important not only when you're on stage, so that people they're not distracted by poor hygiene.
Now, hygiene,
Obviously,
do you mean like the way they smell, the way brush your
yeah.
hair?
So like washed hair,
Yes.
um, brushed teeth, um,
Yes.
deodorant, pressed clothes, or non clothes that don't wrinkle. I love those,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, that's way better.
So yeah, so you don't have to dress wealthy. You don't have to spend a lot of money, but there are things that if you don't take care of your hygiene, it will be a distraction. And so you want to
Yes.
minimize distractions. And again, if wearing high heels is a distraction because you're going to have pain on your face,
Right.
or maybe you're not as comfortable in high heels, like Brene Brown, I think she wears like, you know, clogs on
Oh gosh, I
stage.
couldn't I couldn't do
So,
clogs, but
so it really is like
yeah.
what is going to distract, right? And so look at anything that's a distraction. Certainly, if you have poor hygiene after you speak, you're going to want to visit with people
Right.
and really connect with people. So think about that, right?
Mhm.
But the second thing I would say, as women, we often wear clothes that are too tight.
Mhm.
So that can be a distraction. In the pageant world, right? You want to look nice and sexy, and that's great, but you also have to be really mindful how much, then moves into a different realm of being a distraction,
Right.
right? So those are a couple of things. I always think about when I'm going on stage, I always think about the microphone. Is it like a handheld, or is it over my ear? Is it a lapel mic? So I'm really mindful about, I put my hair up in a bun often, like a low bun,
Mm-hmm.
just so that I'm not hitting the
Yeah.
mic with my hair. Plus, when you have your hair pulled back, people can see your expression more. And you want
Right.
to be animated on stage. You want to be seen. And so
Mm-hmm.
finding a way to wear your hair where it's off your face, then people aren't just going to see the side of your
Right.
hair. They're
Right.
going to see you smiling and speaking. One of the things, I am very short. I am
Mhm.
5 feet. You and I,
Yeah.
like
We see eye to eye.
we see eye to eye. So even when I'm wearing high heels, I will I will let the meeting planner know I don't speak behind podiums,
Right. Because you're just
because
hidden.
all you're gonna see is like a bobblehead doll. So
Yes.
I say, that's one thing. I won't speak behind a podium. It's not advantageous for the audience or me. And
Mm-hmm.
so those are some questions that I usually ask beforehand so that I can
Good nuggets.
connect.
So many great nuggets. All right. So I know that you have something really cool coming up. Can you share what that is and how we can get it?
Yes. So I do a 12-week coaching program for people that want to tighten their message and speak from stage and write their book. So
Nice.
it's a 12-week course. So if they go to my website, they'll see more about that. Just tiffanyberg.com. My company is
Perfect.
called Power Story. I think there's a difference between a story and a powerful story that creates results.
Amen. Awesome, Tiffany. Thank you so much for showing up. You guys go to tiffanyberg.com to follow her and get your power story to impact so
Yes.
many people. Yes. Thank you for showing up and being of service. I loved all the stories and the biblical principles. That was such a bonus as well. And be sure to comment below, you all. What habit are you going to enforce, or what was your favorite part about this video? All right. See you guys in the next video. Bye.